Hi, I'm Rowena. My sister slept with my business partner, then told my parents I destroyed her life. They believed her. Not just once, but again and again, even as she rewrote my name out of our company, our family, our legacy. They asked me to apologize, while she stood there crying, pretending to be the one who was hurt. But what if I told you I recorded everything? What would you do if the people who raised you chose the liar, just because her story was prettier? The sun had begun to dip low over Charleston, casting that honey gold light through the wide windows of my office. It was one of those rare days where the air held a peace I hadn't felt in weeks. I was halfway through a pitch deck when Callista breezed in without knocking, her heels clicking like punctuation. Graham followed close behind, quiet as ever. "Hey, sis," she chirped, setting her handbag down like she owned the place. "You got a second?" I nodded, saving my file before giving her my full attention. Her blazer was crisp, her smile sharper. Graham stayed standing, hovering near the window, avoiding my eyes. "We've been chatting," Callista began, "and we think we've figured out a way to streamline some of our external relationships. Nothing drastic. Just a few updates to our role descriptions and decision authority." Her tone was casual, but I'd learned long ago that Callista never opened a sentence without knowing exactly how she wanted it to land. She reached into her bag, pulled out a folder, and laid it neatly on my desk. "Just paperwork, really. Cleanup stuff. Standard partnership alignment." I opened it, scanning line by line. Her name was now listed as strategic lead across every key section. Mine? Creative consultant. No executive authority, no fiscal signature power. "Is this a restructure?" I asked calmly. "It's a clarification," she said, smiling wider. "You hate dealing with clients, remember? Graham and I have a good rhythm with them. You get to focus on what you're best at, vision." Graham's silence pressed against the walls. I sat back in my chair, my fingers still resting lightly on the folder. "You think this is best for the company?" Callista leaned forward, her perfume cloyingly familiar. "Ro, let's be honest. You've never liked the spotlight. Let us handle the front-facing stuff. You can shine where it matters." That's when it clicked. This wasn't about streamlining. This was about repositioning, about erasing. But I didn't flinch. I picked up a pen, signed the bottom of the page, and slipped the paper back into the folder. "Thanks," she said, giving my hand a patronizing squeeze before turning to leave. "We're all in this together." Hours later, at the pre-launch meeting for our upcoming campaign, I stood by the refreshments table, nursing a lukewarm coffee, while the team reviewed final presentation slides. My name wasn't there. On the campaign posters, the business cards, even the team's official website mock-ups, Callista's name beamed brightly. Strategic lead, Callista Wren. And Graham, managing director. I was mentioned once, in the project acknowledgments. One of the interns, a sweet kid named Dana, turned to me and said, "Callista told us you were taking a step back to focus on, like, personal healing or something. Self-care. That's really inspiring." I forced a nod. "Sure, something like that." Later, after the meeting broke up, I cornered Graham by the exit. "Did you know about this?" I asked, keeping my tone low. He shifted uncomfortably. "She said it would reduce friction. You've been distant lately." I stared at him for a beat. "You know what you're doing is wrong, even if you won't admit it out loud." He didn't respond. He just looked at the floor, then walked away. Back in my office, I pulled out the signed document from earlier. Before placing it in our shared filing system, I scanned a copy to my private drive. I renamed it Rowena V1 Truth.pdf. When I closed the folder, my reflection caught in the darkened screen of my laptop. Still, quiet, but not blind. She thought I wouldn't notice, that I'd stay silent like I always did. But I couldn't help but feel I'd just been erased from mine. The week crawled by after that meeting. I showed up to work, kept my head down, handled what I could. My name was still gone from everything that mattered. Emails from clients started going straight to Callista or Graham. The receptionist even asked if I still needed my office key. By Sunday, I was running on a fragile kind of resolve. When Mom called to remind me about the family lunch, I hesitated. I could have made an excuse, but I didn't. Maybe I was still clinging to some hope that this was just a misunderstanding, that someone, anyone, would look me in the eye and acknowledge what was happening. It was warm that afternoon, Charleston heat pressing gently against the shade of Mom's backyard. Folding chairs were lined up in familiar symmetry under the oak tree, and the scent of pot roast mingled with blooming azaleas. It was almost enough to make you forget that anything was broken. Almost. Callista arrived last, dressed in a cream linen jumpsuit like she'd just stepped off a lifestyle magazine shoot. She made her way through the guests like a politician, hugging cousins, complimenting dishes, touching shoulders. Her smile didn't flicker once when she saw me. Instead, she walked right past, whispering something to Aunt Denise that made her gasp with sympathy. I sat beside Uncle Martin, who was already halfway through his second beer, and made polite conversation about garden mulch and rising property taxes. But my stomach churned. Halfway through lunch, as dessert was being plated, Callista stood up and tapped her spoon against her glass. The clink was just loud enough to hush the chatter. "I want to say something," she began, her voice already trembling. "This past year has been hard. So many things I didn't see coming. So much hurt I've had to carry quietly." Her eyes glistened. She wasn't looking at anyone in particular, but her tone made it clear that she expected everyone to look at her. "I've stayed silent because I didn't want to cause a scene. I didn't want to make things worse." She sniffled. "But I can't keep pretending. Some people, some family, have done things that cut deeper than I ever thought they could." A hushed murmur spread. Aunt Denise placed a hand over her heart. Someone whispered, "Bless her heart." I stayed seated, hands clenched under the table. Mom stood beside her. "Let's not dwell too long on pain," she said with practiced calm. "What matters is that we move forward, as a family." Then she turned to me. "Rowena, honey, could you come here a second?" I knew what was coming before she said it. She pulled me to the side of the porch, where the wind carried the smell of citronella candles and baked peach cobbler. "You need to say something to your sister." "Say what?" My voice was flat. "She's hurting. You may not agree with how she's handled things, but this isn't the place for pride. People are watching. Just apologize and we can all move on." My jaw locked. "You know what she's doing." "I know she's still your sister, and I know this family's been through enough." I walked back to the gathering like someone heading into surgery. Lorraine tapped her glass again. "Rowena has something to say." I faced a sea of familiar faces, some smiling gently, others already turning toward Callista with pity. "I just want to say," I began, keeping my voice steady, "I'm sorry if I haven't been more supportive lately. Things have been complicated, but I never meant to hurt anyone." Callista gave a tight, tearful nod, as if she were bestowing forgiveness. The applause was sparse, unsure. A few claps, a cough, the scraping of a chair. Afterward, I helped carry empty plates inside, rinsing them quietly at the sink. Mom moved behind me, placing silverware into the dishwasher. She didn't look at me when she said, "This is how families stay together, Rowena." I didn't answer. I dried my hands, turned off the faucet, and stared out the window, watching Callista laugh with our cousins like nothing had happened. But I knew better now. I had been made the villain to save her storyline, and I had just played my part, perfectly. They could erase my face from a page, but not from the truth I'd start documenting soon. A week passed after the lunch. I hadn't called anyone. No one had called me either. The silence felt like a verdict. Not explosive, just settled, like the dust after a storm that no one would admit happened. Saturday morning, I drove over to my mother's house. She wasn't expecting me, but I knew she wouldn't mind. I had told her I needed to pick up some old photographs for a nonprofit project. It wasn't a lie, But it wasn't the whole truth either. The house looked the same. Brick exterior. Wind chimes dangling off the porch that hadn't made a sound since I was a teenager. Inside, it smelled like lemon oil and fabric softener, the kind of scent that made you want to sit down and forget what hurt. She was out back, tending to her potted herbs, leaving me alone inside. I went to the living room, slid open the cabinet that held the old photo albums. Red, green, navy, labeled with Mom's delicate handwriting. Christmas 2001. Graduation 2008. Callista's bridal shower. I pulled out 4 of them and sat cross-legged on the floor, like I used to as a child. At first, it was subtle. In the high school photos, I wasn't on the basketball page. Then in the Thanksgiving spread, the one where I'd hosted and cooked the entire meal, I was visible only in a corner, face turned away. I flipped faster. The reunion photos, nothing. The wedding album, Callista's, front and center. Me, cropped or just not there? Then, as I opened the Christmas 2015 album, a page fluttered loose and fell to the floor. I picked it up. A photo from the year Dad had returned home after heart surgery. There we were, Mom, Dad, Callista, me. Except, my side of the image had been torn away. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink. I just sat there, holding the page like it might change shape if I waited long enough. I slid the albums back into place, quietly, like I was returning something that didn't belong to me anymore. No confrontation, no questions. By evening, I was home. The sky had already turned that low Charleston blue, the kind that slips into every window and makes everything inside feel smaller. I opened the mailbox, flipping through bills and flyers. One envelope caught my eye. Thin, off-white, handwritten. My name on the front, shaky but unmistakable. I sat down on the couch before opening it. My grandfather's handwriting filled the page. Rowena, I may not speak much, but I see everything. I know your heart, and I know your strength. Some people trade truth for image. They call it grace. But what you have is real. Don't let the world dull it. I'm proud of you, for the silence you've held and the storm you didn't become. Stay kind, even when it's not returned. Love, Granddad. The paper trembled in my hands, not from the draft, but from the weight of being remembered. I read it again, then again. I folded it with care, tucked it into the back of my journal. That night, I printed a small photo of myself from a college trip. Me standing on a hill, wind in my hair, no one else in frame. I glued the photo beside the letter. They could erase me from their pages, but I'd start writing my own. They thought I wouldn't risk the family peace. They were wrong. It started like most evenings, quiet, uneventful. I'd made a simple dinner, washed up the dishes, and sat down with a glass of water, flipping channels more out of habit than interest. The news anchor's voice was familiar, the kind of calm that usually numbed the noise of my own thoughts. Then I heard her name. Tonight, in our continuing series on women in leadership, we spotlight Callista Wren, media strategist, philanthropist, and founder of one of Charleston's most promising digital storytelling firms. My body went cold. The screen cut to B-roll, office shots I recognized instantly. My office, interns I'd trained. A voiceover praised her innovation, her business instincts, her journey from humble beginnings to leadership. They showed footage from our company's first successful project, footage I had directed. My voice wasn't mentioned, not once. Callista appeared in the interview, sitting perfectly poised, eyes soft but alert. I've always believed in stories, she said, tilting her head slightly, in shaping narratives, in giving voices to people who haven't had the platform. The irony nearly choked me. She smiled and continued. Building this company from the ground up taught me what resilience looks like. It hasn't always been easy, especially with people who didn't believe in the vision. But I kept going. People who didn't believe in the vision. I reached for the remote and turned off the television. The room fell into a hollow stillness. This wasn't just a mission, it was replacement. She wasn't ignoring my role. She had overwritten it. My hours, my sleepless nights, the client pitches, the back-end development, the rejections I had turned into opportunities, absorbed, renamed, recast. I sat on the edge of my sofa, letting the silence sit heavy around me. For a moment, I stared at the dark screen. Then the weight in my chest pushed me towards something familiar. I picked up my phone and called my mother. She answered on the second ring. "Rowena, everything okay?" Her voice was neutral, pleasant. "I just saw Callista's interview," I said. "She said she built the company alone. She used my footage. She talked like I was never part of it." A pause. "Oh, sweetheart," she said gently. "She probably didn't mean anything by it. You know how these media pieces work. They edit for impact. Don't take it personally." "I'm not taking it personally," I said slowly. "I'm taking it seriously." Mom sighed. "Why stir things up now? You girls have always been different. She's just better at presenting things." "So that makes it okay?" "I'm not saying that, but why keep digging into old wounds?" Old wounds, as if they weren't still bleeding. "I just thought someone would care," I whispered. Another pause. Then, "Rowena, don't make this into something bigger than it needs to be." I thanked her, ended the call, and stared at the phone screen as if it might explain something. It didn't. She wasn't neutral. She was comfortable with Callista's version of the story. Comfortable enough to leave mine behind. I got up and opened my laptop. The recording of the interview was already circulating, shared by people I knew, clients, colleagues. Nobody had thought to ask me about it. I opened a new folder on my desktop and labeled it Proof. I began downloading the video, saving screenshots, headlines, comments. Then, without overthinking it, I opened a blank document. Not to rant, not to fight, just to keep a record. If this keeps going, I will respond. I won't be invisible anymore. If they wanted war, I would give them silence sharp enough to cut. Monday started like any other. Emails, bills, a dull ache behind my eyes that caffeine couldn't shake. I logged into my inbox expecting more of the usual, maybe a forwarded contract or a passive-aggressive reminder about deadlines from Graham. Instead, there it was. No subject line, no sender name I recognized. A single sentence. "Thought you might like to see how you come across." Attached was a link. I clicked. The video was barely 3 minutes long, but it felt like watching a slow-motion car crash I couldn't look away from. They'd taken clips from old Zoom calls, team meetings, strategy sessions, and twisted them. Edited in jump cuts, jarring transitions, missing context. I looked aggressive, overbearing. At one point, it made it seem like I cut off an intern mid-sentence. Another clip showed me frustrated about budget allocations, framed like I was trying to sabotage Graham's authority. They'd weaponized my own face, my own voice. I didn't need to ask who made it. It had Callista's fingerprints all over it. She didn't use fists, she used frames. I closed my laptop and sat in stillness for a few minutes. Then I grabbed my keys. There's a cafe on Rutledge Avenue, quiet, nondescript. I parked in the back, took a seat by the window, and ordered chamomile tea I didn't plan on drinking. I opened my phone and typed exactly one line to her. "I saw the edit. Keep pushing, and next time I won't just respond in private." The message was read instantly. Seconds later, her reply came, a thumbs-up emoji. No words. That was her brand of warfare now. Play the victim publicly, smirk in private. Fine. That evening, back at home, I didn't bother with music or dinner. I sat down and opened every shared cloud folder we had used since day one. Contracts, strategy documents, email trails, meeting recordings. I made backups, labeled everything, created a timeline. They wanted to manipulate a narrative. I'd show them what truth looked like, line by line, document by document. I wasn't driven by rage. That had passed. What I felt now was quieter, more precise, like threading a needle or drawing a chalk line around the scene of a crime. Scrolling through our archives, I found files I'd forgotten I created. One was a pitch deck I built from scratch during flu season, while Callista was off on a wellness retreat in Sedona. Another was a full campaign proposal she later presented to investors, word for word, without my name on a single slide. I compiled every piece into a single folder. I didn't send it to anyone. Not yet. After midnight, I booked an appointment with a business attorney. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't post a vague quote on social media. I didn't burn anything down. I just moved the folder onto a flash drive. Then I turned off the light. If she wanted a show, I'd let her star in one she couldn't delete. That Saturday, Charleston was dressed in late spring gold. Warm, breezy, a day made for appearances. Callista had made sure of that. Her birthday invitation hadn't made its way to my inbox, but the event was all over town. A rooftop party, invitation only, press attendance confirmed. She knew how to turn a year older into a public statement. I dressed simply, slacks, a blouse, neutral, a small gift bag in my hand, a framed print of a childhood photo, the four of us from a beach trip years ago. I'd cropped no one. I thought about not going. I thought about setting the photo on fire. Instead, I showed up. The venue was all glass and brass, perched above King Street. When I reached the elevator, the concierge asked for my name. I gave it. He checked the tablet in his hand, eyebrows knit. "You're not on the list," he said, with the kind of politeness that tastes like vinegar. "I won't stay," I told him. "I just want to leave this for her." He looked unsure, then motioned me toward the service entrance. Behind the kitchen, a narrow hallway led to a stack of labeled gift bags and boxes. I placed mine quietly among them and turned to leave. That night, after dinner alone, I checked my phone. A notification pinged. Callista's story was live. The clip opened with candles, music, laughter. Then came the presents. Designer bags, wine baskets, a spa voucher with a printed certificate. She picked up my gift, still wrapped. Her manicured fingers untied the ribbon. "What's this?" she laughed, holding up an empty box. Inside was a single card that read, "Grow up." The room erupted. Even on camera, the smirks were unmistakable. Someone shouted, "Guess someone showed up uninvited." Her voice chimed in, "That's not even the worst part." She panned the camera across her friends, then back to the box. I stood in my kitchen, phone in hand, heart perfectly still. I didn't rage. I didn't message her. I didn't call anyone. Instead, I took a screenshot. Then another. Then I opened my folder. Receipt of erasure. Click. Save. This wasn't hurt anymore. It was confirmation. I sat down, lit a candle, and powered up my recorder. The interface blinked softly. I scrolled through saved files, stopping on one I hadn't revisited in weeks. An audio clip from a rehearsal night Callista had recorded without realizing her mic was still on. Her voice. "You just have to give people a story they can believe in. Doesn't matter if it's true. It just has to be clean. Digestible. I mean, Rowena never understood that. There was more. Names, timelines, strategies. I renamed the file. Callista, She Rehearsal, Confession.mp3. Not for revenge. Not yet. But it would speak louder than I ever had. Now they saw what I never said. But I wasn't done yet. It was barely 6 a.m. when I sat at my desk, still in the robe I hadn't taken off since waking. The light from my screen cast a quiet glow across the apartment, and the audio file waited on my desktop like a loaded confession. I didn't hesitate. I clicked send. No caption, no explanation. Just the file, dropped into the family group chat that had gone mostly silent in recent weeks, except for the occasional meme or prayer chain forward. The moment I hit send, I muted the thread. The recording spoke for itself. Callista's voice, clear, unfiltered, and unmistakable. She's too scared to fight back. That's why it's so easy to take over. All she does is retreat when things get messy. That's how you win, by making sure people like her never think they're allowed to fight. Click. That was it. I didn't stick around to see the initial reaction. I showered, made coffee, and took a walk around the block. The morning was breezy, and the usual sidewalk chatter from neighbors helped me breathe again. When I returned, my phone was lit up. 32 missed texts, 10 voicemails, 2 missed FaceTimes from Aunt Denise. I didn't open a single one. I wasn't interested in explanations or she didn't mean it like that, or maybe it was taken out of context. For the first time in this entire mess, I felt no need to explain myself. No desire to defend, just stillness. I archived the chat and opened a new document in my receipt of erasure folder. I began recording what came next. Reactions, silence, the ones who spoke up, and the ones who didn't. Later that afternoon, Callista went live. Not a word to me, not a text, not a call, just a live stream. She sat in a sunlit corner of her tastefully curated home office, makeup flawless, voice syrupy. "Hi, everyone," she began with a weary smile. "I wasn't planning on addressing anything, but I think it's important that I model honesty and grace, even when it's hard." I laughed, out loud, alone. She went on to talk about betrayal, family miscommunication, and the importance of channeling pain into purpose. She never mentioned my name, but every viewer knew exactly who the villain was supposed to be. Then came the pivot. I've decided to launch a new initiative, a foundation focused on helping women rebuild their narratives after being silenced or marginalized. Donations started rolling in. The comments poured over with hearts, hand claps, and people praising her resilience. But not all. A few comments cut through. "Didn't she just get exposed this morning? Is this about the audio? Is she really the one who's been silenced?" I watched the hearts slow. I watched her eyes shift, barely, but I saw it. She smiled tighter. Later that evening, a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years sent me a direct message. "I used to think you were the cold one. I was wrong." That's all it said, but it meant something. The shift had begun. Not loud, not sudden, but real. Truth didn't always roar. Sometimes it whispered. And sometimes, when delivered right, it had teeth. I didn't need to be part of their story anymore. I was writing my own. By the time morning light reached my windows, I had already printed the legal document. The one with my name, once there in black and white, now scrubbed and replaced with hers. It wasn't just a revision. It was a revisionist history. One notarized, signed, sealed, and so very deliberate. I highlighted the change, folded the paper carefully into an envelope, and addressed it to the family attorney. Before sealing it, I snapped a photo and dropped it into the family group chat. No words, just the image. Silence didn't last long. Buzzes rolled in like thunder. First Denise, then Uncle Carl. My cousin Jessie, who hadn't spoken to me since college, chimed in with a string of question marks. Even the ones who always stayed out of family business started asking what was going on. Then came Lorraine's message. "We'll talk when you're calm." No denial, no surprise, just condescension wrapped in motherly restraint. And Dad? Nothing. That told me everything. I stared at the screen until the messages blurred. Then I closed the app and opened a new window on my laptop. I didn't shake. I didn't breathe hard. I just moved with a kind of surgical certainty. I uploaded the full audio file, the one from rehearsal, the one she'd forgotten to delete, the one where she said it all. People think power comes from truth, but it's in perception. If they see me as the one who held it together, that's all that matters. Rowena? She's too moral for this space. She'll crumble before she claws. My finger hovered over the send button. I attached the file to 2 emails. 1. The executive board of her charity. 2. A curated list of her top donors, names I knew well, names she had flaunted like armor. This time, I included a subject line. Transparency matters. And then I hit send. I didn't watch the explosion unfold in real time. I went for a walk instead. Past the row houses and Spanish moss. Past the cafe where she once hosted a vision board brunch with borrowed brand lingo and my old slides. When I got home, my phone was lit like a Christmas tree. Screenshots from friends. Anonymous accounts reposting the audio. Then the silence. her charity disabled comments. Her Instagram grid changed. Suddenly, all quotes and oceans. Graham called once. I let it ring. He texted twice. I deleted both without reading. Later that evening, I opened a blank document in my receipts folder and typed, "Delivered, will revision, 9:02 a.m. Delivered, audio file, 9:47 a.m. Reaction, comment freeze, 12:18 p.m. Graham call missed, 1:26 p.m. I scrolled back to the family group chat. Denise had left. Jesse had posted a meme, dark humor but unmistakably pointed. And Lorraine, no response. Not even a reprimand. It occurred to me she might not know what to say anymore. Or maybe she knew, and silence was her last form of control. Either way, I had reclaimed what mattered. Not their forgiveness, not their invitations. My voice. Healing didn't mean pretending it never hurt. It meant walking away without needing to prove it did. The morning air in West Ashley carried a kind of hush, like the world itself had decided to exhale. I sat outside my trailer, a warm mug between my palms, the steam rising in slow, forgiving curls. Birds chirped. A dog barked 2 streets over. For the first time in months, my phone lay inside, face down. The silence in the family group chat had stretched for days now. No more cryptic messages, no gifts, not even a birthday reminder from Aunt Shirley. I didn't miss it. Callista had vanished from social media. Her charity was under audit, quietly but thoroughly. She'd gone from appearing on panels to issuing formal sabbatical statements. Public apologies hadn't come, but the absence spoke louder than any PR spin. My peace didn't come from that collapse. It came from not needing it anymore. Lorraine called mid-morning. I let it ring twice before answering. "Rowena," she began, voice softer than I remembered. "I've been thinking about all of it." I said nothing. It got out of hand. I didn't see it then, not clearly. I thought keeping peace meant silence. But maybe I just didn't want to believe what was in front of me. There was no apology, not directly. But I'd learned not to wait for words to shape themselves into what I needed. Not from her. "Thanks for calling," I said, and meant it more than she probably realized. Later that afternoon, a voicemail from Graham waited. I didn't stop her. I should have. I didn't because I was weak, and I know that now. I just wanted you to know. I listened once, then deleted it. Knowing wasn't fixing, and sometimes silence was the only closure anyone was going to get. That evening, I met with a small nonprofit based a few blocks away. They wanted to create a video series, stories from families, the real ones, not the sanitized versions. When they asked me why I was interested, I simply said, because some truths don't have PR teams, but they matter. They didn't need the backstory, just the conviction. Back home, I sat at my desk and looked at the letter framed above me. My grandfather's words, worn, honest, steady. Stay kind, even when it's not returned. I didn't frame it for revenge. I framed it to remember who I'd fought to remain. Later, as dusk painted the sky in bruised lavender, I found the old audio file, the one that unraveled everything. I hovered over the name, Callista, Rehearsal, Confession, MP3, then archived it. Not deleted, just set aside. The power it once held no longer belonged to it, or her. I laced my shoes and stepped out onto the trail behind my home. The path was quiet, the leaves crunching softly beneath each step. I left my phone behind. No pings, no interruptions, just me and the rhythm of my breath. The past would always be there, etched into memory, scattered across hard drives and headlines. But it no longer dictated the shape of my days. I had walked through fire. I didn't need to carry the ashes. Looking back, I've learned that silence is not always surrender. It can be a strategy, a boundary, a form of self-respect. I didn't scream to be heard. I spoke when it mattered. And if you're watching this, maybe you've been there too. Erased, misunderstood, rewritten in someone else's version of the truth. To those still holding their voice inside, you are not weak for walking away. You are strong for choosing peace over performance. Family is important, but so is your integrity. You don't need everyone to clap to know you did the right thing. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt like the outsider in your own story? What did you do? If this video touched something in you, leave a comment with one, or tell me where you're watching from. If it didn't hit the mark, let me know why. It helps me grow. And if stories like this matter to you, please hit subscribe. More are on the way, and I'd be honored to walk with you through them.